Hi, welcome back to Focal Point AF. Our talk. Brian Fisher is my name. You're listening to Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. We're talking here about what President Obama, the blueprint he's following, and I'm not saying he's setting out to destroy this country. Please don't misunderstand me. But what I am saying is that if that was his purpose, if all of this, if he had set out to destroy this country, this is exactly how he'd go about it. This is the blueprint that you would follow to destroy this country, to weaken it from without, weaken it from within, and pave the way for this country to be governed by a tyrant. This is exactly how you would go about it. You'd first of all weaken our military, and he's been doing that by bagging the Tomahawk missile program, the Hellfire missile programs, no replacement on the horizon for a decade, reducing the troop strength in the military. I mean, he's verbally said this. Look, we're not going to try to have an army that can fight a two-front war anymore. We're only going to have an army that can fight on one front, and maybe we can have a delaying or holding action over here on a second front. But he's lowering the sights for what our military is capable of doing. Now, we got two coasts. We've got enemies that could come from the east, could come from the west. We need the capacity to defend ourselves on more than one front. So this is deliberately exposing the American people, making us weaker. That kind of weakness, we all know it simply invites aggression. Now, what I was talking about before the end of the break, number to call if you want to weigh in on some of this is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. The second thing that you would do to weaken the United States, first of all, weaken its military, because that's job one, right? Even according to the Constitution, I mean, the single most important thing that the federal government does is to provide a military to protect our security. That's job number one of the federal government. None of us begrudge any taxes we pay that go to provide a strong military. We know how important it is. And we know that that's a legitimate function of government. So we are happy to pay taxes so that we can have men devoting their full energies to keeping us safe at night. No Christian who's centered in the Scripture has a problem with that whatsoever. So President Obama is weakening the military, but he is also disarming the National Guard. We touched on this briefly yesterday, but he's doing this by taking the Apache helicopters away from the National Guard and replacing them with Black Hawk helicopters. Now, the Apache helicopters, they are combat aircraft. They're designed to fight. They're designed to shoot. They're designed to blow things up. They are combat air vessels. The Black Hawks are transport vessels. Now, they're trying to make this up. We're just going to save so much money. And, besides National Guard usually are involved in search and rescue missions, and that's what they need is they need transport helicopters. We're really helping them to do their job. But I think this is quite deliberate on the part of the president to weaken the National Guard. Why? Because in a worst-case scenario, and again, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying this is happening around the corner, going to happen this weekend, going to happen tomorrow. But I think we've got to think realistically about this. We've got to examine the possibilities. A worst-case scenario would be that the National Guard, the state militias, they might represent the last line of defense against a president who is drunk on his own tyrannical power. Remember, and don't think I'm wearing a tinfoil hat. That's what the Constitution says. That's Amendment number 2. You might need a well-regulated militia. That's not limited to the National Guard, but you can think National Guard. Why? Because a well-regulated militia might be necessary for the security of a free state. If you want your state, whether you live in Mississippi or Kansas or Florida or New Hampshire or Michigan, and you want your state to remain a free state, you may need at some point a well-regulated militia, even to defend yourself from an out-of-control, overreaching, tyrannical central government. That's right in there. That's what the Second Amendment is all about. That's why it's a right of the people. It's not even the right of the states. It's the right of the people to keep and bear arms. So if necessary, we can form ourselves into a militia to defend against another state or defend against our own central government. So I think President Obama wants to weaken the National Guard because he knows this is the last line of defense against a president. I'm not saying it's him, but it's the last line of defense against a president that is drunk on his own power. And remember, these National Guard units, their primary commander-in-chief is the governor of their state. They don't answer to the president of the United States until they are called up to duty. So these men are used to following the directives that come from the governor of their state. Now I want you to imagine a Cliven Bundy situation. Think about Cliven Bundy. And I want you to picture this. Cliven Bundy, an ordinary citizen. So a picture, you can think Cliven Bundy if you want, but I'm not limiting it to him. This is just an example. Think of an ordinary citizen in one of our sovereign states. And this ordinary citizen is being threatened by armed bureaucrats that are pointing assault rifles at his wife and at his children. So that's the situation. You got armed bureaucrats like from the BLM, the brown shirts of the BLM, out there pointing assault rifles at the guy's wife and at his children. Now, imagine that you've got helicopters, Apache helicopters, that are hovering over that situation as it's escalating. And you've got this family huddled in their ranch house, surrounded by armed bureaucrats with assault rifles from some central government agency. Let me ask you this question. Would it make a difference to you? Would it make a difference to you if those Apache helicopters that are combat helicopters were under the control of a president who's on the side of the BLM? Or would it make a difference to you if those Apache helicopters were under the command of a governor of a state who was determined to protect the right to life, liberty, and property of his own citizens? And right away, you can see why a president might have an interest in disarming the National Guard. Here's what George Washington said. Again, I want you to, this is not tinfoil hat stuff. This is George Washington, father of our country, first in war, first in peace, first in the hearts of his countrymen. A free people ought not only to be armed and disciplined, but they should have sufficient arms and ammunition to maintain a status of any who might attempt to abuse them, which would include their own government. So that's George Washington. The people need to be armed. A free people should have sufficient arms and ammunition to protect themselves against anybody that might abuse them. Says this would include their own government. That's not me saying that. That's not somebody from the NRA saying that. That's George Washington saying that. And that of course, sentiment, of course, echoed in the Second Amendment. Here's what I say in the column. A power-mad president would not want any state actors with, quote, sufficient arms and ammunition, end quote, to quote George Washington, to protect their own citizens from federal oppression. In other words, if he finds it necessary to fire on a state's militia, he doesn't want that militia to be able to shoot back. Now, you can go read the rest of it at rightlyconcerned.com. I talked about the third thing he's doing, which is arming bureaucrats. So weakens the military, disarms the state militias, the National Guard, and then arms up federal bureaucrats. And we talked yesterday about the number of federal bureaucrats now that are armed to the teeth. Department of Education has people armed to the eyeballs. Bureau of Land Management, saw that, the brown shirts of the BLM all over Cliven Bundy. The Department of the Interior, they're armored up. The United Postal Service, they're armored up. The Environmental Protection Agency, they got 200 agents. National Park Service, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they got 224 special agents. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, these are the meteorologists. They're the forecasters. They've got a whole bunch of armored up agents. So you got 120,000 bureaucrats. This is not military. This is not law enforcement. 120,000 bureaucrats armed to the eyeballs. And remember, President Obama said back in 2008, I want to read this quote, then we'll go to the phones. This is President Obama. People have forgotten about this, but he said, we've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well-funded as the United States military. Well, now he's got it. Got an army of 120,000 civilian bureaucrats armed to the earlobes. And I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that is not a good thing for a free, liberty-loving people. All right, let's go to the phones, 888-589-8840. 8840. Let's start with Dave in Tennessee. Dave, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind? Dave, are you with me? All right, let's drop down. Let's keep Dave hanging on there in case we get back to him. Let's go to Donnie in Frederick, Oklahoma. Donnie, are you with me?
Hey, yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, go ahead. What's on your mind?
As far as Obama's concerned, what I see is, they ain't doing nothing about the immigration and nothing of that. We should be worried about if Spanish want to come in and take over the United States, what would we do about that if we had only one front?
Well,
I think that his grandmother was Spanish. I don't think he cares about the black people to start with, and he's out for the Spanish people, and that's what we need. We do need to watch out for what he's doing, because you are right about a lot of stuff he's doing, and that's about all I got to say.
Okay, well, thank you, Donnie. So you're looking at a president. Our military has been critically weakened. Our state militias have been critically weakened. Our nation's bureaucrats have been armed to the eyeballs. And I would say that only a fool who doesn't love this country as it was founded could fail to be deeply alarmed at what we're seeing happening right in front of us right now at this point in our nation's history. This is, to me, is unprecedented in American history. We've got a president that's got another 2.5 years to work his mischief. And so the question is, who will stand in his way? Who in Congress will stand in his way? Which governors who sit in governors' mansions around the country, who will stand in President Obama's way? We don't want this resolved with vigilante justice. Trust me about this. We want this resolved through the Republican process by those that we have elected to serve us and lead us. We want those people to address this problem and to solve it. We don't want to take this matter into our own hands. We don't want vigilante justice. That's just chaos and anarchy. But we want people in Congress that have enough gumption to stand up to this abuse of power, and we want governors at the state level who have enough guts to stand up to this abuse of power. Focal Point AFR Talk, 888-589-8840. Back with your phone calls and more. Stay with us.